Folks, both the speakers are ready to take some questions from you. While you think, I'm going to kickstart one for Prakash. Now, as we collect these stories, do the stories make the speech? Do the speech make you search for a particular story? James, if you could come on stage, please. How was it?
So I think the temptation is, of course, to try and take the story and say, let me make a speech out of it.
Okay.
But honestly, it's a bit better if you know start with the end, start with that aim, and then try and say, hey, how can I find a story which could serve the purpose over here? And the way to do that, here's a little tip from an old man. Write down those stories. What will happen to us very often is we'll see something, we'll say, wow, there's a great story here. And of course, we know how good we are, and therefore we'll remember it. Chances are, 2 days later, you won't remember that story. So it's a good idea to write it down. And if you've written it down, then when you're looking for saying, hey, that's the message I need to deliver, you might find a story somewhere in your bank, in your own memory, which says, this can work for me.
Okay. Questions?
Yep.
Yes.
Question to both of you.
And please identify yourself.
I'm Shiva Kumar from Trichy.
Yeah.
All right, Trichy is 300 kilometers from here. The question is to James Taylor and to Prakash also. You spoke about, you use the psychometric tool to find out the rational part and the emotional part. Prakash, to what extent do you go through that process of identifying how much should be rational, how much should be emotional? So when you build up a story, and to you the question, James, is because Indians predominantly are emotional, right? The Westerners are predominantly rational. So how does the IBM Watson tool help in case it's an Indian and in case it's a Westerner? Thank you.
So that's a great question. On the AI, it does show the national differences. For example, I was speaking in South America the other day in Ecuador, and I did that exercise, and I put it through, and the part of the psychometric that says fiery was off the charts, and it was incredible. So when I came up, the stories, I had a much more fiery way that I was putting into there as well. I think you have to, like any technology, you have to blend it with the human part. So in addition to using that side of things, I also have conversations with the client. We do what's called a pre-event call. They will tell me what is important to them. It's not always the same as what is important to the audience. So I have to. I'm using the psychometric primarily to think about the audience, but I'm also in the back of my head, I'm thinking about what the client would want as well. But if I had to choose between whether I'm looking to please the client or the audience, I would go for the audience. So I would, in this case here, I would go more emotional. Now, it still is my personality. I can't change my own personality. I can't be the most fiery type of person, the most emotional person, but I have to do it and stay true to me, who I am as well.
Super. Yeah, so I think I love this line which says that I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. And I think that's probably a good principle to use. And very often our rational minds are locked, okay? And emotion is perhaps the key that can unlock it. So you perhaps want to win first with the emotional piece and then try and get to rational. You'll find most times people have strong beliefs. And if I believe what's right, you can tell me what you like. My belief remains where it is. So you need to kind of get me to try and open my mind to being willing to change that belief. And maybe that will help.
I'll just say a final quick thing on that as well. There's a wonderful quote by, I think it's Maya Angelou. She says, people will never remember what you said, but they will remember how you make them feel. So one of the questions I asked in the discovery call to the client is, I say, how do you want people to feel when they leave the room? That's what I'm going for, because all the stats and everything, that will disappear. But how did you feel? That's what you'll remember.
Sure.
My name is Anoop. I have a question for both of you. We all know that they say message is more important than the medium. But message is more important than the medium. But in today's time, with so many mediums coming up, is the message being dependent on the medium? The point which is, while a story is good, but is the storyteller making an impact? And for us aspiring professional speakers and speakers, what is the thing where you feel that, okay, I have a good story, but am I putting it right? Whether technology is helping me or this style.
Sure. So, simple advice, don't worry too much about am I putting it right. That's an easy fix. The tougher bit is to find the right stories, to find those stories which are authentic to you, which says something, which is something that you want to share with the world. Okay? And you will find that this bit about how did the storyteller communicate it, I think that's overstated. There are enough examples of people who just tell stories straight from the heart. It doesn't matter what the accent is, it doesn't matter whether the grammar was right, it doesn't matter that the person wasn't making terrific eye contact. None of those is relevant because there's a story that's powerful. So focus on the story. The bigger risk all of us run is to get so caught up in all the glamour and the packaging that we forget that we've got a bad product to start with. That's a dangerous place to be.
And so, did you want me to ask that? On the
Technology side, I mean, you did show them you use the little space from what is making sense and then you customize.
So I'll give you an example of that. I think the message is more important than the medium. The mediums change all the time. So let's say if I have a message, if I have a particular message I'm looking to get across, I will change my delivery style depending on the medium. So for example, if I'm speaking up on stages, you're obviously using more of your physical body, you're moving around, the eye contact, things are changing, you're using those things. When I'm doing things on video, for example, so in smaller screen, I have to make much more facial gestures. It's like the difference between being a theater actor and a screen actor. So I do have to change, and if I'm doing social media, you're doing very, very quick. So I think the message, I feel, stays the same. It's just you have to like tweak it. You have to put a little bit of spice on it depending on what the medium is.
Hi, my name is Pradeep. In my professional career, I have been coaching my subordinates, team members, and I, over discussions, pull out stories, and I put it down there, and I have been, till now, under the impression that I've been doing a good job. Till the time I heard you, we don't know what the response has been. Now, the response could have been good because I come from a higher pedestal in terms of professional career, and I'm putting it across to the person who is sort of need to hear me out. Now, where do I understand whether the person is really looking at me and accepting me telling the story, or is it just because of the position I come from that he's forced to hear and get along with life? You know, how do I get that clarity? Thank you.
Yeah. For a start, you might want to try and tell stories to people who don't know who you are. Okay? You might want to start, you know? Because otherwise, they'll all tell you, "Arey, sir, what a good story." "Oh my, so funny. You're so funny, sir." You know? But I think you've got to be careful because sometimes, especially in an Indian context where hierarchies are very strong, it's not a good place to test out whether what you're saying is right. So maybe try and do this in two ways. One is to try and tell people who don't have a hierarchical relationship with you, who don't know who you are. That may be one. The other is to try and tell stories which are about your weaknesses. Okay, very often we tend to think we must tell stories of our successes, how good we are. You know, of course, this is simple. When I was in class 2, I won that gold medal. No, actually, that was in class 1. Oh, yeah, I won it both years. You know, we have a good story here. But try and tell them about the time you flunked your Hindi test. You know? And what did you learn as you did that? And how did that make you into a better leader? How does that make you a person who understands that not everybody is good at everything? And you said, you know, that my Hindi teacher then told me, don't worry, I know you got a good grade in English. So I remember this now, even today, to say that the guy who's flunked in Hindi doesn't mean he's a disaster. It just means maybe there's something else that he's good at. And when I lead teams, I'm looking for not just people who are saying that, hey, you fail in Hindi, you fail in English, but I'm saying, wow, you fail in Hindi, you must be good in maths. Okay, and that is a good story to try and share. It takes your position out of the equation.
James and Prakash, awesome presentation. I just wanted to know we're talking about Professional Speakers Association. What would be the difference between a speaking and training. And how would you be pitching for it differently, and how would you be delivering it differently?
Speaking and training. the I think what you often find is this triptych of a lot of speakers who do speaking, training, and authoring, STA. That's often very common. These work very well together. But I don't think you have to be a speaker and a trainer. I think there's some people who are just brilliant at speaking and training is not in them, and vice versa. So I think it's a very individual thing. I see them as very different skill sets. I think the training is much more about, in some ways it's harder, I would say, training than speaking. This is just my take. Speaking, we just get up here for an hour, we tell stories, we have fun with an audience, and then we go. Training, I'm doing, from after this, I go to Beirut in Lebanon, and I'm doing a one keynote and a one-day training. I'm much more scared about giving a training, because it requires much more emotional energy and intensity from me than coming up and speaking. So I think they're different skills, and you don't have to be good at both, though.
One last question.
I'm Dr. Biswajit. I'm a surgeon. I'm from Orissa. I have a question for Prakash. The thing is, like, should we tell stories for the sake of telling stories, or the story should pop up while we are speaking? That is the thing I want, because people...
Should you tell stories for the sake of telling stories?
Because most of the people, they come to the stage and they start telling stories, and ultimately there is no connection. Fine. But if we go on speaking, and in between the story pops up, like I have like a lot of stories in mind, because everybody, like you told, because that is not coming into the picture. So how we think in that line, we will be while speaking, that should pop up. What is your idea?
Yeah. So, they say this about TED speakers, that you must speak so well. You should have memorized every pause, every line, and every bit so well that when you speak it, people think, wow, so extempore, so good. Right? So that's what happens. So I think when it comes to stories, the worst kind of story is, like I said, is to start off by saying, I was on this plane and there were these 3 people, and one of them said, there are only 2 parachutes left and there's a problem. How do you send that? So you have a joke that you read in school, but it still works because, you told your subordinates the story and they laughed. So you can't be starting with that story and assuming that everybody will take that story. That's not a good idea. What's a good idea is to say, hey, for the context that I have, for the message that I want to deliver, can I find a good story? Okay? And I think if you're saying that you start speaking and then a story will pop up, doesn't always pop up. Be careful. Usually the wrong story pops up. And I heard somebody is doing Me Too over here, so just be careful. Okay? So be very, very careful with thinking that a story will pop up for you. It won't. But what's a good idea is to say, what's my message? What's my audience? What do I want to convey? And then say, is there a good story that can do that for me? Because otherwise you will say, here are the 8 things that you need to do, be the perfect surgeon in the world. Okay? You could do that. Or you could do what Atul Gawande does, is to say, hey, I'll tell you stories about how I learned to become a better surgeon, how I learned to become the value of a coach through surgery. You got a good story to tell. Trust me, it doesn't pop up like those scissors that pop up in the operation theater.
Lovely. So thank you, James. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.